Hello, everybody, and welcome back to CoMotion Labs Fundamentals for Startup Series. I'm Brady Ryan, manager of Hardware Hall. We're so happy to have everybody here today on a very snowy Friday, and incredibly excited to welcome our guest today. She's a huge get, and I can't wait to hear what she has to say. For those of you that are new to us, CoMotion Labs provides multi-industry lab system hosting startups inside and outside of the UW community in life sciences, biotech, health tech, medical devices, robotics and hardware, software, IT, and fintech. Our startups range from pre-seed to Series A, employing 2 to 15 people each, and are variously headed by students, faculty, and community leaders with both new and seasoned entrepreneurs. While we wait for everyone to log on, I'll make a few announcements. Sadly, this is our last talk until our spring series, which begins in April. Watch your email in early March, and we will be sending you our upcoming schedule, links to register, and all that. All of our Fundamentals for Startups presentations are archived on our CoMotion website under lab/startup training videos. We've covered a ton of topics over the past several years, so if you have some free time, go check out some of our past talks. For the full schedule and to register for future fundamentals, visit comotion.uw.edu/events. Also subscribe to our YouTube channel if you want to be notified when new talks come out, and click the little bell. Finally, Fundamentals for Startups is funded in part by a grant from the Economic Development Agency. We are going to be dropping a link in the chat to a quick survey. That survey helps us immensely to report out to our grantors so that they keep giving us money. So please take a couple minutes and do that. We would hugely appreciate it. We're also supported this year by Bluetooth. See how Bluetooth audio sharing is poised to once again change the way you will experience audio and connect to the world around you.
Bluetooth introduced the world to wireless audio. Calling, listening, watching, making us safer, more productive, more joyful. It's part of the fabric of our lives. Now, Bluetooth will bring us even closer to each other and our world with audio sharing. It will let us share with others our music, our experiences, listening and watching together. The places we go will share with us, enriching our experiences, helping us hear our world. Breaking down barriers between interests, cultures, generations. Introducing Bluetooth audio sharing. Closer together.
Okay, today, Jillian Musig, General Manager of Masters Fund, is here to present the Capitalization Stack, getting the right funding in place for growth. Jillian is the CEO of Outlines Venture Group and Managing Director of the Masters Fund, a woman-led global venture capital fund based in Seattle. She is the co-founder of Moz, the world's most popular provider of digital marketing software, and serves on the board of directors and advisory boards for technology companies worldwide. Jillian has served as an advisor to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the German Marshall Fund, the U.S. State Department, and government programs in Switzerland, Germany, China, and throughout the Balkans. Over the course of more than 30 years, Jillian has helped thousands of companies to grow, launch, pivot, and thrive. Jillian will take questions via chat, so feel free to put those in the chat box to the side. And I will now turn the presentation over to Jillian. Welcome. Jillian, I think you might still be muted.
Absolutely correct. Look at that. 1,000 hours on this platform and I can still make a mistake, but thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. And yes, I'm going to talk about On Beyond Venture Equity with a nod and an apology to Dr. Seuss or Dr. Seuss. Okay. So moving forward here. It is an honor and a privilege to be with you, who are the leaders of enterprise companies, not only here in this area, but worldwide. Now, when I say that you're a part of this august group of leaders, you can be sure that I'm not using this overused word lightly. All right. No other group of startup leaders has faced the issues that you face in building your companies in an economic and social lockdown of over a year. Those the founders of the glory days of fast VC money, private jets, obnoxious waste, they know nothing. As of March 20th, 20, actually, they know absolutely nothing. So let's take a look now at the concept of venture capital itself and the capitalization stack of your company. As a whole, yes, the VC community, doesn't have a good reputation. Conventional venture capitalists are often known as sharks. They're gobbling up the profits of the hardworking entrepreneurs and, the teams that build these companies. But there are always two sides to that coin. It's venture capital is a necessary part of entrepreneurship. Capital is needed to build these world-changing companies. Right? It's a very high-risk proposition. One of my portfolio company CEOs sent me this amusing little piece that makes a dark humor reference to the looting that went on in 2020 in number of cities throughout the United States. But truly, investing in early stage, privately held companies in any sectors, let alone the tech sector, is a highly risky asset class, right? So it's high risk, has to be balanced with high potential rewards. The job of the VC's fund manager is to make a return for their investors. If they're going to take the great risks and only a few companies will succeed, they have to see those great rewards. Oops, let's see. Oh, now I've overdone myself. So let's take a look at venture capital by the numbers and see what those risks really look like. 80% of all conventionally venture-funded companies are going to fail in 5 years. Now, this is the same numbers as the general markets. Every butcher and baker and, shoe shop has an 80% chance of failure in the first 5 years. But you would think that the infusion of massive amounts of capital, of wisdom, advisory services, openings to key employees and key partners, and of course, reference clients would change those numbers. But it does not. These are numbers that should give everyone, entrepreneurs, investors, and civic leaders, pause. 16% of venture funds, and again, this is across the board, these are averages, not means, so glittering generalities, but still, in some, it should give you pause. 16% will not achieve an IPO or sale. In other words, they don't exit. So they return nothing to their funds, because that's how venture capitalists and the investors in those funds get their capital back out, a sale or an IPO. Fewer than 4%, it's 3.7 something, so just about 4%, will have a successful exit. Okay. So the question is begged, did venture capitalists really make a mistake on 96% of their funding decisions? Right? And a lot of people will chuckle and they'll say, well, I never really thought about it that way. And I would like to posit, how else would you like to think about it? It's their job to return an ROI to that fund. And yet 96% do not. So what happened? I don't think they made the wrong decision. I think they used the wrong funding model. We need an appropriate funding model to address, if nothing else, the 16% who continue to pay their bills and grow and are quite profitable and all is well, but they do not exit. Surely at least that 16% could have returned something to the fund, right? And then there are massive numbers of companies that never receive venture capital at all. We'll talk about that as well. So, venture capital, as we know it today, was invented in 1946 by Georges Doriot is how you pronounce it, actually. He was a French-born American who was, as you can see, a real underachiever, an investor. He founded INSEAD, which is the world's finest business school located in France, ARD, which was a first venture capital firm here in the States, a military strategist, and of course, a Harvard educator, of course, right? So all underachievers. Anyway, he invented this stuff, right, with the goal of investing in GIs returning with bright ideas from the Second World War. And the object was, and I quote, to fund innovation. Those innovations were supposed to be the technologies that would power the existence of humans on this planet for the next century. The investors thought that about 2% of their investments would pan out, and the balance, not at all. These were moonshots, and we still use that terminology today, moonshots. Right? The US government got in game with this, right? They supported this type of very high risk investment with tax advantages and so on. There was an understanding that great risk could lead to great reward, and the United States wanted to be the center of that innovation, of the technologies that would control the next century. But for too long, we've been taking a hatchet to a scalpel job. One kind of venture equity. So venture capital being designed to fund innovation, you might say that innovation could loosely be translated today to the software that powers the next big thing. And again, that's loose. There are other things as well besides software. Right? But in general, you would say that's why you would hear in venture capital AI and IoT and AR, VR and blockchain and so on. And you will hear that again and again and again until the next thing comes along. And you should hear that again and again. But venture capital in its conventional format as designed in 1946 and having changed relatively little since then, right, was not designed to fund the companies that leverage that software to build a very decent thing, even if it should be quite profitable. But we keep slathering this moonshot kind of investment structure, investment model, and strategy across all startups. And that's where the problem lies. So I'd like to invite you to consider, rather than I have to raise equity, I'd rather you thought about your capitalization stack. You don't use a single piece of IT. You use an IT stack, right? Think about it the same way when you look at your finances. You're going to need different kinds of financing as your company evolves. There's, one kind of financing to get across that first ocean till you make your first project, product or project. And then there's the sea level, hike through the plains and into the forest. And finally, the end, you'll need another kind of funding to get over those mountains you see in the background of this pretty little picture, into the promised land of success, right? Different kinds of finance, not just one. So venture capital, fortunately, is finally evolving. We now see things like, let's see if this will work. It's not working. There we go. Crowdfunding and structured equity and conventional venture capital, and of course, venture debt. All kinds of funding alternatives are available to you now. Now, with conventional venture capital, we should kind of get real about the numbers and the model. It's not for everyone. Right? As soon as you've taken $1 of venture capital, you have agreed to sell your company, or in very rare instances, go public. You've also agreed to serve at the pleasure of your board. And should your goals diverge from those of the board itself, these investors, which is to return funds to investors, then you can be replaced. Are you sure you want to sign that contract? Make sure you're a good match for this kind of investment. The high risk is on all sides. So are venture funded companies actually more profitable to the founders? You might say, well, VC funding, funded companies are the big winners. That's how you make the big bucks. So we have to play by those rules of sometimes not so friendly, VCs. Well, not always. This book, Lost and Founder, was written by my eldest son and my co-founder at Moz, Rand Fishkin, and I've taken a piece of this right out of his book. It's not always the best way to go. I'm going to see if you can see my cursor, I think, on the screen at this point. Let's say you've got a $15 million exit here, right, with a consulting business at a 1.5x valuation, a multiplier there, or a $40,000 exit with a 4x multiplier on the same amount of revenues at the time of sale, but it's a product business, which means that it was scalable and they got investor funding. So this person now has 15% of the company at the exit. This person still just owns their company. They bootstrapped. You can see clearly it's not always the best way to go. Now, this is just one, layout, if you will, but make sure that you are a good match for venture capital. Make sure that it's the kind of exit you're looking for and that your company will meet the expectations. Because again, 80% are going to die. And in some ways, they actually get killed off. Okay, so there's venture debt and venture equity options, and they're beginning to expand quite nicely. Bridge loans, revenue share agreements, dividend models, royalty agreements, traditional loans even, and of course, structured equity. Revenue share loans, let's dig in there. With this model, investors are actually able to invest in even a product, not just a company, if they want. Not always, but think about it this way. If you had a line of business, you could monetize that line of business by getting a revenue share loan on the proceeds of that line of business. Right? They don't have to really bet on the whole company. They can bet on a product launch. Even if it's the entire company receiving the capital, what they're really saying is, well, yeah, you launched that product. We think you're going to make a whole ton of money, and we're going to take a piece of it back until we're paid in full. It's reasonable, right? They're really betting on that product launch. So it provides a little nuance, a little expanded opportunity for, if you will, the lenders. They're not really investors. They don't have a piece of the action. They don't take a seat on your board, right? All of this remains in your control. So using a revenue share loan is good for both investors, if you will, lenders, and the entrepreneurs, in that there is that separation and it gives you some nuance there. Okay, now, downside is you'd be carrying debt on the books of the company. Depending on what else you want to do, that may not be wise. So you have to determine whether or not debt funding is the way to go for your company. Now, oh, wait a minute. I do want to say one more thing on revenue share loans. Right here in Seattle, we have a company called Lighter Capital. They're not the only lender, but they're one of the bigger names right here in town. If you have already $15,000 or more per month recurring revenue, they really like SaaS models because of the recurring revenue, but others are possible. Subscriptions of other kinds are possible. If you have that already in your company, they will lend you the growth capital, and they call it non-dilutive growth funding. They didn't pay that marketing guy enough. Brilliant. Non-dilutive funding to grow your company by using something like Lighter Capital. It'll cost you an expensive credit card. I don't know, 18 to 35, maybe 40%. But when you think of the 10x minimum and the hundreds of X multiples that the VCs hope to get, this is cheap capital. So it may be a piece of what you use to grow your company. Okay, dividend models. My son launched his new company, SparkToro, with a dividend model. If you plan on keeping the company privately held for the long term, which is quite different than just a lifestyle company, right? A privately held corporation, right? If you plan on that, then venture capital isn't a good match for you, right? Because they want you to exit, sell, or have an IPO. Dividend models enable you to have investors come in sometimes as early as the idea stage. That's what happened over at SparkToro. He hadn't built the product yet. The investors came in for the long game. They put the money down. the entrepreneurs, there are two, took a reasonable low-end salary that is commensurate with whatever's in the marketplace. That's fine, so they can keep going. And then in the future, when the company reaches an agreed upon monthly gross revenue for a certain number of months, then they will declare a dividend. And they will continue to declare dividends annually or semi-annually, however you want to write it. Right. So again, the nuance helps you to build this as you need to see it and as your investors need to see it. Now, every time a dividend is declared, the entrepreneurs, as the largest stockholders, get a piece of that dividend. It's a much better way to take capital out of a company than one's salary. Salary is the highest taxable sum that you're going to get out of your company, right? That's the taxed at the highest rates. Taking it out as a dividend is a better way to go in the United States. Elsewhere, it might be different. Okay. Also, your investors get a piece of that dividend. And with every dollar you give them, they have reduced the at-risk capital that they put into your company. They put in 100,000, you gave them $1. Now they've only put in 99,999 until it is all paid in full. And then everything else is gravy. And this can go on to their grandchildren's grandchildren. It looks like the public markets. You have stock in a company that declares dividends. Now, if you wish, you could also put a cap on it. You could put a time limit on it. You could put a dollar limit on it. You could put both on it. You could say when the investors have received 4 times their invested capital, the company has the right to repurchase that stock if they so choose. All kinds of things are possible. These are very good models for companies with high gross margins that can declare dividends and have everybody engage profitably here. And then there are royalty agreements. Okay, not that one, but at least I've got your attention. Okay, for royalty agreements, it's very much like a revenue share. It's a kind of a piece of that stuff. With a royalty agreement, if you have something that can be licensed, think pharma and healthcare, APIs, underlying technologies. If you have that kind of thing, then you can leverage or monetize each one of them and say you can have an investment in the royalties of this or that product. And that makes sense over time as well for the investors. Okay. And then, of course, there are loans. Now, often it's overlooked as dangerous and dicey and so on, but consider equity is the most expensive capital you will ever take. You take in $1 million and you're expected to put out at least 10 million, and they're hoping for 100 million and more. But do have a serious discussion with your significant others whose lives your enterprise is going to affect. I mean, do we hawk the house? Do we hawk the family, heirlooms, whatever it is? Maybe you do just that. Maybe you don't. But it's a personal decision, and it does have long-term consequences. So use loans judiciously, but consider that if you can do something like put a second mortgage on the house today, you might get that at 4%. The VCs want a little bit more than 4%. Decide what you'll risk and how you will get those rewards over time. And then there's structured equity. Now, these ladies are raising a venture fund called the Masters Fund, and it focuses on structured equity. The one on the left is me, and the one on the right is my business partner, Ann Kennedy. And we have, if you will, we invest in companies that have a product in the market. They are already with at least one customer on the table, so somebody has agreed to buy that product. And at this first turn of revenue, we provide the dry powder that enables them to expand that sales model and to replicate it and to increase the sales. Often it's something used as a bridge between seed and Series A. We could be that seed investor there, where a Series A would say, well, we'd like to see the traction. We see that they have the capacity to do this. We get them over that hump to get those benchmarks achieved. Sometimes it goes between angel and seed or Series A. These are kind of mushy names, in the industry at this point, depending on the sums that you're raising. Sometimes they're not headed for Series A at all, right? They just have a product, or they've got something in the market and they would like to expand that. Sometimes expanding profitability means we have a suite of products, and if we had some money to build the last piece over over here, well, then we can increase the cost of our subscription, or we can, sell that as well, and it will increase our gross revenues and our gross margins, and we can afford to repay this. In other words, redeem the stock. So structured equity is an interesting way to go. It puts a finite limit on the amount of capital that you will pay back, on the multiple that you'll pay, and we can talk about that later too. Now, conventional venture capital is not for every company, is really what my message is to you at this point. Funding your products business with services, it not only works, but it's a time-honored tradition. It's about leveraging what you have. So think about that, and think about the relative risks of running a scalable products company versus the services company. Maybe your services companies can support your products company. So what do we do about all of this anyway, right? First of all, consider all your options. Consider your exit requirements if, different kinds of companies. Consider whether or not you want to take venture capital at all, of any kind. Decide whether it's going to be venture debt or venture equity, and decide how much. How much is it worth to you to grow that much more quickly? Could you do it on your own? Would somebody overtake you if you don't take venture equity? That's usually the reason that people are told, oh, you've got to raise equity or somebody else will build this faster. Right? Think about the sector you're in, the moat that you already have, your IP protections, and what kind of capital you're going to need to get there. In addition, think about the amount of time it's going to take to get it. Yes, you need 10 million bucks to do whatever you're going to do, but you don't all need it in May. You only need 500,000 in May, right? And by August, you're going to need another 1 million. And then you're going to need, right? Figure that out as well, because it will help you decide which parts of the capitalization stack you're going to leverage at any given time. Build effective teams. The most effective team over a quarter of a century of data are women at the helm, gender diverse. Just is. They return an average of 35% higher ROI to the fund. Trust me, at some point, finally, the investor is going to start taking a look at that. In the meantime, it offers an extraordinary advantage that we leverage at the Masters Fund. Your first question should always be, what can I sell today to build what I need tomorrow? We just talked about that with services to software or hardware, right? Services to product. Figure that out. Time-honored, works almost every time. Don't follow other people's paths. The right questions will illuminate the right answers for your company. Ask these hard questions. Think about them with yourself, with your team, and of course with your significant others. What really is the professional and financial goal? What was it Forrest Gump's mama said? You only need so much, the rest is just for show. How much are you looking for? What are your financial goals for this thing? What is a life-changing sum? Who am I building it for? What do I want to create? What's my risk tolerance? And what's the end game? Sometimes it's right up there with conventional venture capital, and go for it with all guns blazing. But know the risks, know the rewards, and know the work ahead. Otherwise, there are alternatives. And finally, regardless of whatever capital you raise, you're going to need a game plan. So the first thing you do is you build your hot list. The questions are, who invested in version 1 of whatever you're building version 2 of now? Who was the lead partner? Who championed that deal, right? Did they have a successful exit? If so, they're on your hot list, right? They already invested in your sector. They know the language you're speaking. They know the risks. They know the rewards, and they've already achieved it. They're probably going to be interested in doing it again. Build relationships, yes, with the fat cats. The primary reason that women don't get funding, and they still only get a little over 2%, is that they lack access to power. They don't get those introductions to venture capitalists or other investors. So regardless of your gender, reach out early. Share your ideas, share how you intend to expand, share what your revenue streams are, make relationships with these fat cats, if you will, early in the game. By the time you're ready to pitch, they should know you and know who you are. Ask business questions of these VCs as you make your relationships. This is a very interesting statement, and it's really important. Einstein said, if I had an hour to solve a problem and my life depended on it, I would use the first 55 minutes to determine the proper questions to ask. Don't ask a VC for help with your pitch deck. It's ancillary to your business. Focus on your business issues, not on your fundraising issues. Ask them how to scale. Ask them if you've got a thorny problem. If you follow their direction and it works out well, they're more likely to listen to you again the next time. And finally, build a personal brand. Becoming well known, right, is a cheat code for your personal brand. And for those of you who may not have noticed until now, I've got this little cheat code icon down here to let you know when it's a cheat code. Okay. Your introductions to venture capitalists are going to be faster and easier if you have a public personal brand in your industry already. They will know you and they will want to be able to meet you. So how do you do that? You speak publicly. And no, you're not going to get to speak at large events and so on instantly and overnight. But at every little meetup, offer to do it, get better at it, get, refined over time. Blog. This is a tough one because it takes some time to do it. And nobody but your mama's reading it. And actually, mama's probably not reading it unless she's me. Anyway, what I'm saying though is this was a cheat that we used, if you will, at Moz. For more than 3 years, Rand wrote the Moz blog every single day. That's more than 1,001 nights of Scheherazade as if his life depended on it. And it did. Over time, he became known as a thought leader, but over time, he also became a thought leader. He didn't dial that stuff in. He did hard research. He uncovered the things that nobody else was willing to slog through. And he published data, decisions, reporting, ideas, all of this stuff. And Moz became the center of the conversation around search engine optimization. We built an industry, not just a company. And it all started with that blog. There's hard work involved. There's no shortcuts. Just get on with it. Okay. Ask for press coverage. The press is as eager to talk about you as you are eager to get into their press because they need content. So just keep throwing things out there. Sooner or later, they will know that you're the one who knows something about this field, and they will call you because you're the expert, right? You're not really bugging them. Just keep throwing stuff out and make relationships with the folks who publish these things already, okay? And learn where your influencers hang out. So it's not just about getting the information out on your own website. It's about understanding where they're all hanging out and then making sure that you are part of that community and sharing that stuff. First thing you do is to listen, lurk, and learn, and then finally make comments on other people's posts who already have that gravitas. And don't just thumb up or thumb down or say, yeah, or no. Make a wise comment, a thoughtful comment on it on those powerful sites. And if you like, you can even post an entire blog on your own site that talks about that subject and then go invite those people to come back and have a look over at your place. You might actually get more than just 1 or 2 people reading your own blog. It's much easier to become extremely well known for one thing than it is for many. So get your story clear, but also understand the lingo, the language of VCs. If you're going to speak to the Romans, speak like the Romans, right? Understand how they look at your industry, how they talk about investing in your industry. Listen to them as often as possible, and then be known as the one that they want to get to know. Boil it down, don't boil the ocean. Figure out what it is that you're going to do. Your first beta product should be exquisite. It should be a pleasure to use, easy to integrate, and so delicious that your customers cannot help but take a bite. And that goes for B2C products as well as B2B products, right? The point is, don't try to create everything at once. Create one thing that is absolutely superb and then build on it. Not only will your customers grow more quickly and easily, you will get the attention of the VCs you're looking for. Your story is absolutely critical. This is how human beings, the human brain, takes in information and retains it. Get good at that story. This wheel is already invented. Follow the line of storytelling, and you'll be able to explain how you get to a new normal once people put in place your solution to whatever problem you're solving. Don't reinvent that wheel. We know this works. And here are some examples, and they all come, by the way, from Rand Fishkin of SparkToro, who wrote that book. Here's the first one. Uber, yep, better taxi service. That's clear, it's concise. Can you do the same for your business? WeWork, it's Regis, but so much cooler. Soylent, slim fast for tech bros. And then there's Betamax versus VHS. This is an old one. Beta was actually better than VHS. VHS had a better story, right? It's not in the noise level. Good stories and having prowess in that launches companies, even when they are not superior to their peers. A lack of clarity will detract right from your power. So get good at this. There's no excuse for not getting ready and being powerful on this. And finally, make a choice. Choose your capitalization stack. Start with what can I sell, right? And only take capital when you're absolutely sure it will significantly increase your chances of success, not a moment before. I often find companies trying to raise capital and they're not quite sure what they're about to do with that capital, right? You better know it's not designed to just sit in the bank. Craft a short, simple, emotionally connective story. Practice it with 1,000 people. It's fine if you do it in front of a mirror, but that's not the same. The more you speak it to a real human, the more effective it's going to be. Get good at it. And this one bears repeating as well. Build that personal brand. We're the Masters Fund. I'm raising $100 million to fund women-led technology companies that build better ways to live and work together. Thank you very much.
That was unbelievable. I've been laughing and chuckling to myself this entire time, and then each of those last slides that you went through are the basis of a 1-hour presentation that I also really want to see. Incredible amount of content. Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
I also just love anytime VCs will stand up and say, hey, don't necessarily take VC money. Look at what else is out there. I feel like a lot of time founders can get, and I understand why, right? But people can get so focused on getting that VC check when there are other ways. I love that.
Yeah, I think because they don't talk about the other options often enough. And so I do spend a lot of time talking about ways to capitalize the growth of a company, because not every company is going to be a unicorn. Unicorns, by their definition, are rare. Be real about what you're building, be realistic about what your future looks like, and then find a capitalization stack that'll let you get there. There's no reason for 80% of these companies to die.
Yeah, and that capitalization stack is just such a great mental model. It makes sense right away, and I think that it encourages folks to think about avoiding a one-size-fits-all approach that does not fit anybody. I mean,
right, so, one size fits nobody.
Yeah,
there you go.
There's so few companies that can just go out and raise equity over and over and over again.
That's
hey,
right.
we've got a ton of questions, and I'm very excited. One came from Anson Fatland. He was mentioning, when you were talking about the companies that take on venture funding and eventually fail, you said that 80% of these companies will die and some will get killed off. What does that getting killed off mean?
Well, if you get a Series A and your VC does not elect to invest in your Series B, this is a very clear signal to other venture capitalists considering the Series B that this is a no-go.
Yeah.
Right? See, there are 20 companies in a portfolio, and this is just a example, right? 20 companies in a portfolio, and they're going to hope that one of them makes a really good exit, and the rest actually are not going to. In that case, that's 90-10, right? So by that time, they're going to double down on the company that they think is going to go to the stars, and maybe a second company. But that's it. The rest of them don't get second follow-on funding. If you don't get follow-on funding, the other VCs know you've been written off. Oops.
Okay. I assume that doesn't. I assume that doesn't apply. A lot of funds will say, "Hey, we are a pre-seed fund." I think some of them do follow on, even though they maybe say they don't. But how does that work if you take on pre-seed or seed funding from an early stage fund and then they don't reinvest? Are those signals more clear?
A seed is, I should say, it's not quite the same. They're not large enough to really take advantage of that follow-on funding, although they may write it into their terms and so on. So they could do some of it. But remember, from a fund manager's point of view, I have to decide how much new stuff I want to invest in, how much I want to hold that dry powder for second follow-on fundings, and can I afford the stock at that next valuation, right? I mean, if we've got a company kind of doing this, then the question, well, do I really want to? I don't know. But it's done that already. Well, maybe I can't afford it. So, there's this balance, right? So fund managers also have to manage that risk and that trajectory. So seed, not quite as much because they're small funds. But if you get a reasonable, funding from a good sized company, trust me, if Andreessen isn't coming in again, everybody else knows, not that one. It's somebody else.
Yeah.
Right. What they're doing is they're seeding it to another one. I mean CEDING.
Yeah.
Right. Because, kind of the big 20 will play, and it's about 20, 25 companies, right? They'll all play. Now, this one's invested in, I don't know, Uber, and that one invested in Lyft, and that one invested in, we don't know the name. This guy seeded it to the other guys, right? And said, okay, you guys go, right? So that's what happens at those larger games.
Question from Laura G. She was asking about how you think about and look at funding from strategic partners. Is that significantly different for an entrepreneur? I guess a good question is, as a VC, if you see that there was a large strategic that was in an earlier round, does that change how you think about the deal?
Yeah. Yes, it can. Sometimes strategics will get in because they want to use the product, right? They want to kind of get access to it. Sometimes they'll get in because they want to buy the company. So, for example, even at Microsoft, M12 will work a little bit with M&A over there, right? If somebody inside Microsoft says, gee, I want this thing, with enough clout, of course, then they kind of activate up that M&A, and maybe the fund will put some capital in the earlier stages because they want a piece of that action, and we'll see how the whole thing comes. Often a strategic investor, corporate strategic investor, may put some money down at the earlier stages, maybe a seed or Series A, because they'd like a seat at the table to either buy the company or, of course, to invest in what they see is a significant kind of step ahead in their industry, and they would like to be part of that. So if you see that you could take an earlier seed stage funding from a corporation, and you could see yourself selling to that corporation, this kind of puts the whole thing on rails. That's nice. But if you do that and you don't have 3 of them, then you don't have any other suitors on your, dance card there. It's just the one. Then you have a little bit less leverage on the negotiation at the end game. So you have to decide how you're going to play that.
And are there any concerns about strategics IP theft? I mean, is that an issue about taking on an investor from somebody who's well-positioned, can do anything they want to do, and then they have access to what you're doing?
Yes and no. If you take on a strategic investor, you can make an agreement that you will not share the IP. Right? You will not discuss IP in your board meetings. They get to put money in. They get to sit on your board. They do not necessarily get access to your IP. All right? It can be done. At the same time, yes, there is some risk. You have to decide, as an investor from the outside at a later stage, we would say, so, is it your IP or did somebody else take it? And often IP can be overridden, if you will, and overwritten with a very small change. So you've got a patent, but how defensible is it? And if you got into financial bed with someone where it might have been defensible, but these are the very guys who could do it, right? Who could leapfrog you, then you do have some concerns and you want to check those things out. So yes, you want to think about it carefully. There are always risks involved, but sometimes it's a risk worth taking. And as I said, especially if you could see yourself selling to that company, it's a great way to go.
Sure. So we spoke before this presentation kicked off. We were talking about other speakers we had, and I mentioned that Minda Bruce had been one of our speakers, and you had a story there. I'm hoping you can tell that to folks here as well.
Well, Yoko Kano, who's Minda Bruce's colleague at her venture firm, was a venture partner over at the Masters Fund. And she came to me saying, I'm thinking about apprenticing for a long time with someone else and so on, and then getting ready. And all I really did was encourage her to say, no, you are fully prepared and qualified to launch your own fund. I was very excited when they did launch their own fund, these two women, Yoko Okana and Minda Bruce. And I have helped to launch another one in Toronto, nominally with the same conversation, just that you are ready, you are qualified, get out there and do it. If I can launch 1,000 women-led funds, we will have money coming from different hands to different hands. And this is that bit about vestigial anthropological behavior that I promised you at that time. We know that 98% of all venture funds go to men. And we know that more than 2/3 goes to about 2/3 rather, goes to tall, white, American spoken, slender, youthful males from able-bodied, from Harvard or Stanford with a baritone voice. Wow. I mean, if you were to create an avatar, it would look like that. Yeah. So the question is, why are these men funding themselves? Why are they replicating themselves? And the answer is, don't shout at them that they're doing a bad job. They're not. They have funded the technologies that power the human existence on this planet. They've done their job, right? So let's stop shouting at that, right? The answer lies in this anthropological behavior. If a humanoid infant cozies up to a saber-toothed tiger, it does not last long. It must cozy up to its own kind. And it is not just humans. It's all mammals. And not just mammals. Birds flock together. Fish swim in schools. And even the plants of the planet will grow in clusters. If this behavior is vestigial behavior of a carbon-based life form, we're not likely to get rid of it. We can acknowledge it, and we can do things that help us to, if you will, expand our scope of capability. But it would be hubris for me to think that I could invest in sub-Saharan Africa. I don't know if the problem you bring me is real or rubbish, or the solution is real or rubbish. I don't know if this product is going to make the trip and survive it, or, be permitted through by the governments, or get into the hands of the right people, or whether it's going to be adopted by them, or whether it will have some god-awful effect on the land I don't even know about. I have to trust that my colleagues will do that. And if I have a trusted colleague, I can follow. I can lead in my home and in my center of expertise. I can follow when I have trusted colleagues. And that's the key to moving that capital to different places and different hands. But also, we must have more funds that are founded and operated by funders of different backgrounds too. The money must come from different hands and go to different hands. That's how you solve the issue.
Yeah, that's great. Best of luck in launching 1,000 of those. I think we can absolutely use it. And if Minda and Yoko's fund is any indication, then I would love to see 2,000.
I want to,
please.
Yes.
I was hoping you could talk a little bit more about the structured equity piece.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you had what was it? There we go. You had a preview of my actual last slide. Somebody please ask me.
I was going to pass that off as my own good idea of a question, but thanks.
Well, take it. Please ask me. So structured equity looks a lot like conventional venture capital. All right. The first is that I hand you money and you hand me stock, but it is redeemable preferred stock. And the company redeems, which means buys back that stock at a preset multiple. Let's say you need to use that money for, I don't know, 3 years. Well, it's a 3x. And again, these are just off the top of the head. It doesn't have to be those exact numbers, but it's easy to get, an example. So if it's 3 years, it's 3x. And if it's going to be 4 years, it'll be 4x. And you can even put the nuance into that agreement that says, if you redeem the stock in full in 36 months, this is the sum that you'll pay for each stock. I'm going to buy it for 1 and you're going to buy it back for 3. And if you need to use that capital for 4 years, well, then you'll buy back the stock for 4. All right. Or maybe everything you can redeem in the first 3 years will be at $3 and the 4th year will be at 4. You can do all kinds of things around the nuance. They are dependent on the amount of time that the company needs to use that capital before redeeming that stock and the risk factors involved in the likelihood of success that the company can redeem the stock. Rather than a conventional VC's question, which says, can this company become a unicorn? Do we have a shot at it? We ask, can this company return an ROI that is commensurate with the risk of the asset class in a reasonable period of time? Very different questions. So with that, again, redeemable preferreds, the company redeems them, and then we carry survivable warrants, which means that the last payment for redeeming that last piece of stock, now the company owns all its stock back again, or at least the stock that they gave to the fund, right? They own that again. Then for 60 months, 5 years, we carry a 50% warrant, which means in the unlikely event, because this is designed for companies that won't exit, but in the unlikely event that the company heads for the stars and has a happy exit, well, we will participate at 50%. All right, we got them somewhere to get there. That's great, 50%. So nowhere near as much as if we had held the stock, but a piece of it. In this way, we protect the upside for our investors, but it is unlikely that it will be leveraged because structured equity is really designed for a company that is not likely to exit within 5 or 6 years. So for those companies that exit in 11 to 16, and by the way, that is the average now in conventional venture equity, it is not 3 to 5, it's 11 to 16, right? They still can go on to the end.
That's fascinating. I mean, when you were talking about Georges Deroit or whatever his name was, it struck me how VC, I mean, it's even just the nomenclature, but the approach as well hasn't changed since its founding, which is so ironic because we're talking about what a lot of people see as one of the primary engines in the innovation economy, and how does that not change? So it's great to hear.
The bleeding edge isn't changing, right?
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned lighter capital. I thought that was really, and that may have been around for forever, right? I haven't been.
Not very long. No, it's fairly recent, but I've seen a number of them pop up now around the country. So I think that's also a very good indicator that people are looking at better ways to fund corporations' growth, right? And again, not necessarily corporations that will be only scalable.
Yeah. One thing that you talked about, the hot list, I really like that, and that was around kind of creating a target list of investors that play in the space, have played in the past. How important is that? I mean, I think that I tell my
absolutely critical. Seriously,
I tell companies a lot that if they're just spamming out emails, then none of them are getting read.
Exactly.
So I mean, I guess from your side of the table, you get an inbound email from an entrepreneur that is totally outside of your investment thesis. I mean, are you even opening it? Are you ever going to forward it to a friend, or is it just
no? Here's the thing. If I have a personalized email from them and they really have looked at what we invest in, and they're asking now, is this a good match? We would like to discuss this with you. Sure. Then I do that. And I will open up cold call emails all the time, because one of the things that I rail against with conventional VC is that, and I'll just say this. I sat on a panel at Startup Week, I think it's about 2 years ago already, with someone from Madrona Capital who had no trouble in saying to a delegate in the audience who asked, how do we get a meeting with you? And his response was, well, It helps if a friend of mine, introduces you. And I thought, did you just say that in public? Did you just tell us that this is how the closed network works? Really? Those with privilege can get the introduction. And those who have children to tend and second and third jobs, they don't have that time and privilege to go make those connections, to go get an introduction to you. Wow. I will open every email. I give 50 minutes to every entrepreneur who wants an hour of my time. I just need 10 minutes break between them. And I used to do this at the Columbia Tower from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, every hour on the hour, including the lunch hour. And I would listen to more than 1,000 ideas a year.
Phew.
Yeah, you got to put in the hard work. Often I would be told, even before I launched the funds, like, how do you know about all these good, things and the, ideas and whatever? You already have this good deal flow. And I said, well, if you put in the hard work, then you would have it too. But truly, these VCs often have people sitting in the front desk. Now it's virtual, but still, they're running interference and not letting those calls through. Open the damned email. It might be somebody you want to see. That's my advice to the investors. And yes, I'll do that. But don't spam me by not reading what I invest in. I get requests, for example, from all male teams, right? Women-led, gender-diverse teams return an average of 35% higher ROI over more than 25 years. I get that it's average. But First Round Capital returned in the, reported in 2016 from their 10-year report of their 2015 closing fund that the women had returned 63% higher ROI. These are not rounding figures. You'd think somebody would pay attention, right? And a gender diverse team makes good sense, right? You can acquire new markets capital efficiently. Somebody knows how to talk to them. Right? You can solve problems more effectively when you have different experiences instead of everybody coming to it from the same angle, right? So it made kind of intuitive sense. But women are also more capital efficient. They raise 44% of the capital raised by men. Right? Did you just tell me 66% less dilution? As an investor, I have to take notice, right? They exit 1 to 2 years sooner in conventional venture capital. 1 to 2 years sooner, that's less risk because time is a risk factor and time is a cost factor. The cost of capital is what else could I have invested in during that time. I have to account for that in the returns that I get from this particular investment. And that doesn't matter whatever investment you're considering, right? So with all of those things and the fact that the women are only getting 2%, by the way, that says to me, well, nobody's fighting for the deal. So nobody's driving up the valuations.
Yeah.
And in truth, a female investor at Series A will get an average of 16% of the valuations enjoyed by men. Did you just tell me I could get an 84% discount on my initial investment? And then I get 66% less dilution. And then I get out 1 to 2 years sooner. And then I'm going to get 35% higher ROI on average. Wait a minute, where do I sign?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
After a while, the numbers, although they're all averages and they're all glittering generalities, I get that. Right. After a while, that volume of information would say that informs it. So if you're an all male team, don't come knocking at my door.
Sure.
Be amazed at how many do. All right. And if you're an all male team, get a woman in there.
I was going to say, go hire some women.
For God's sake. Exactly. Build the most effective team, for heaven's sake. Yes, put them on the C-suite. Even in the public markets, they return even more, 37% higher ROI if there's 30% female leadership in there and on the board of directors. It says, ooh, scrub my public portfolio too. Why the heck would I invest in anything that wasn't more likely to return a higher investment to me, ROI to me, right? I can't guarantee a return on investment, but I sure shoot and can mitigate the risk.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Jillian, thank you so much for this time. This has been fantastic. It's great to have you on. Thank you for sharing all this.
Thank you.
Best of luck launching 1,000 of these funds that are going to teach everybody a lesson by getting 5x the return that everybody else is.
There you go.
But again, we really appreciate you being here. To all of our viewers, thank you for tuning in as well. This is our last presentation of the winter series of Friday Fundamentals, but we're going to be starting again in April. So keep an eye on your inboxes. We'll be sending you information as we get those scheduled, and we can't wait to talk to you all soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.